just jump in and perhaps start on the education and then finish off on the point that you just raised. Education in and of itself, it's a community exercise, I think is part of sort of what we're getting at here. In terms of sort of the mentorship, sponsorship that Mr. Pilgrim mentioned. So I think as a society, we have to control what we can control, right? So if there are influences that are outside of the community, I mean, barring censorship, there's very little that we can do to sort of, limit the access that our young people have to external influences. But what we can do is ensure that, our culture and our values and what we stand for sort of shines brighter and sounds off louder than any external influence. And to the issue of education itself, it's a sort of weighty question, because there are so many components to this. Right. For a lot of persons, particularly in our public institutions, part of the issue is not just, what are they being taught on a day in and day out basis? It's also, whether they can focus, right? Like, do they have food on a given day? Do they have access to their books and to technology that they need? Like, the wider societal issues seep into the education process, right? So that's one part of it. So how do we improve those aspects of society to put more, to take the pressure off of the homes in terms of what they provide in order for kids to actually be able to focus in schools. Mm-hmm. Then it's, what is the quality of the actual training? Like, what are we actually teaching them, right? And we have now access to so much more information and sort of methods of teaching, including, bringing in courses that are available online or available across the world, and connecting our students to courses and to classrooms globally, right? How do we do that? And then in terms of tertiary education, like, how do we ensure that our colleges and universities are at the same standard or better, or lead? I mean, we should be leading in things like marine biology and those types of skills. So how do we, bring us to a level that is a lot better? I think for the longest time, we probably accepted the status quo. And this is something that's frustrated me for the longest time. It's okay, we can point to like exceptions, like what, with Dr. Ferguson, like what we have on the panel today, but we're talking about the average. How do we bring up the average? And how I have always felt that we should be, it should be the mission of the country to lead globally, not regionally, globally, in terms of education, because there's really no reason why we can't at the very least set that as a standard, even if we fall shy of that. How do we set that as a standard, and on a regular basis check against whether we're meeting that? Like, are we leading in math? Are we leading in the sciences? Are we leading in the languages? Like, how do we benchmark ourselves not against our peers in the region, benchmark ourselves against the best in the world, because that's what we can be, right?
That is what we are doing, I believe. Your husband, who is sitting next to you, said earlier in the conversation that as a country we are punching above our weight. Yeah. Are we doing that, Rashad Cooper, in terms of educational development? I said to someone the other day that we are the closest neighbor to the United States, talking about Caribbean countries, and we have what you call these days cultural imperialism, where we are importing bad habits. What do you say about the state of education, the quality of education, and the extent to which we have been really exporting some of the best and brightest in our country?
Yeah, I mean, this almost just lights a fire in me, Ambassador Jones, as you know. I can talk for hours when you talk about education reform. So let me start with education. Mrs. Pilgrim did speak to the fact that you have varying degrees of quality of education in the Bahamas. And if I could expand on that, I would say that throughout the Bahamas, we have phenomenal access to education, both in the private sector as well as in potentially in the government sector, which I don't know as much about. But my observation is that there is a classist divide there, because you have, and we don't need to call out the schools or the areas in which they're located, but we all know where they are. $30,000 a year, and you have access to the latest and greatest when it comes down to coding, when it comes down to facilities, the arts, it could come down to languages, et cetera, et cetera.
But that's where there's everywhere in the world.
Yeah, but see, at the same time, let me even go back, because this is really what I'm about. In my view, education starts with the Southern African principle of Ubuntu, Mr. Jones, which you may be familiar with, which Nelson Mandela articulated, which is a person is a person through another person. What that means is that our ability to create a society isn't my ability to live in an affluent suburb in a gated community and sort of realize the pleasures and luxuries of life as I see fit. You spoke a little bit about the gun culture. We know where it comes from. I know, and maybe in your capacity, you have to be careful how you respond to that. But we have, and I can say it, manufacturers of guns in the United States, AK-47s and whatnot. We have no need for them, but they're available to any and everybody almost. But we see, the proof of the pie is in the eating in the Caribbean, right? In terms of the level of violence and of course mass shootings here. But I agree with what you're saying. Yes, it is a global issue when we talk about inequality. And I wouldn't call myself a socialist, although there are certain elements of socialism that I find attractive. What I am saying is that I think we need to figure out how do we provide high quality and high levels of access to the best and brightest in terms of education. And this is what I like about what Ms. Bo is doing, because maybe we can look at how we have certain universities and other resources that can really focus on those who may not have the financial or access to individuals to maybe go overseas or go to some of the top private schools in the Bahamas. So for me, education, see, you're talking about credentialization. Credentialization and education, in my view, is not the same thing. Credentialization is getting a degree in something. Education goes back to the ancient Greeks, in my view, in preparation for citizenship. So anyway, I don't want to derail the conversation, but you know how I go when it comes to
don't you think we have and we are preparing our people in the Bahamas for good citizenship and to take their rightful places in the society and to be competitive. We are exporting our talent. Our nurses are going to North America. And wherever you go in the United States, you can find Bahamians. Our financial services sector. I was speaking with an investor the other day who mentioned to me that the quality of education in the Bahamas is very high, and that he was attracted to the Bahamas because of the quality of education. And so it brings me neatly to the point, so that I can ask you all, what are your colleagues in the United States, people who you are running into? What are they saying about our country, the Bahamas, in terms of our educational development?
So Ambassador Jones, I want to offer you something, and then I would like to hear what you have to say about this, Mr. Cooper, because it sort of gave a political answer to the question. But what I want to bring forward a little bit more forcefully is this idea of what he mentioned, education versus credentialization, right? Yes. I work in an area, so my main business is data science, data analytics, AI, and ML. And our number one issue is that we are creating industries faster than we create content to standardize how we teach people to be in the industry. So the most important thing that we can do is teach people how to think, how to find information, and how to continuously learn over a period of time. When I deal with the organizations I deal with, I sit on the board of aerospace at the University of Michigan, for example. That is the number one challenge, that we are innovating faster than content and curriculum can be created. And so there's a idea or a acceptance that this education is fluid, and that new means of learning, online courses that may not be taught by professors, but that may be taught by experts or people who have created the field, may be how we start to move towards a new form of education. But I think that education is really not this, it's not this static thing. Even within medicine, for example, a lot of my physician friends are cross-training. They're getting into telemedicine. They're getting, they're developing applications to help enable medicine globally. And so I know that we have a limited amount of time, but I want to offer that education right now is incredibly fluid. And in a lot of the industries where we are leading, there isn't a standard of education to hold anybody to, or there are very few standards of education to hold people to. And so the most important thing is to teach people how to think as opposed to what to think.
Yes, we're educating people for life, right, Dr. Ferguson?
Yes, I think you can hear me now, Ambassador Jones.
I can hear you now. I'm so happy that you've been able to join us. Tell us about your education, since we gave the others the opportunity to do so at the beginning, and then we can move on.
But I heard Mrs. Cooper's all Bimini High. I think that's what she said. So I want to raise her by something you said earlier. I went to Thelma Gibson Primary School, L.W. Young Junior High School, and Doris Johnson Senior High School. The L.W. Young and Doris Johnson, I graduated valedictorian. Then I moved on to University of the Bahamas. It was formerly known as College of the Bahamas. I actually only did 1 year there, so I didn't complete my degree there. But I was a President's Scholar, which is a 4-year all expenses paid scholarship to the College of the Bahamas, which was at that point in time. I did 1 year there. Then I moved on to the University of the West Indies in Jamaica, where I did the pre-medical courses and then moved into medical school. And graduated with honors from medical school. I worked at the Princess Margaret Hospital for about 2 years, primarily in the surgical department, prior to getting a residency position at Howard University Hospital, where I'm at currently, finishing in the next actually 2.5 weeks with my general surgery training. And afterwards, as Ambassador Jones noted, I will be moving on to Detroit to specialize in plastics and reconstructive surgery. So that's where I'm at now. Thank you.
No, but go on and let's talk a little bit about education and the quality of education in the Bahamas, and give us your impression.
So I think, the panelists had a lot of good information about where the quality of education is. I essentially think that we actually have a great quality of education, and I feel that a lot of it is actually up to the student themselves in terms of applying yourself to the knowledge and putting in that actual work. But I feel that the schools and the curriculums that we have are actually up to par with what all of the students graduating from high school need and require to further themselves in an ever so competitive world. But I more so have the perspective that it's up to the person themselves to want to do better. So we have a lot of students who are more or less just going through the motions or going through the waves and are not as focused as they should be during those latter years of high school. And sometimes because of that, they get lost along the way. But I do think that our educational level is actually pretty on par with other Caribbean countries and can somewhat be compared to some American cities as well.
Dr. Ferguson, the other day someone told me that a number of physicians that we had at PMH, and you worked at PMH as well, they graduated from CV Bethel High School, and that at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica, at the Mola campus, that they excelled and they were top of the class.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Like I said, it's about how much dedication you put into your craft. And I do think that, those are the few people from the government schools that are focused. Because, if you go generally when you're going to a government school, you can have a lot of distractions because of different societal classes that are there. So you can have a lot of distractions, but if you're not focused and if you don't have a plan for your life, and if you don't have goals, if you're not disciplined, which essentially I needed to be and a number of my colleagues were, you can get sidetracked. But I do agree with that sentiment that a lot of the government school graduates that go to University of the West Indies, end up, doing very, very well. And I do know a few of them as well, as you mentioned, from CV Bethel and from other government schools.
Yeah. And let me ask you all, it's a privilege to be speaking with all of you, and we are going to be continuing this series, speaking with Bahamians in the diaspora all across the United States. And I mentioned at the top of the conversation that the councils general in various areas of the United States, they are finding the talent for us to expose our Bahamian talent, because there are so many. I wouldn't mention sports. We're going to do a special program on sports, a special conversation, I should say, on sports development. But how can you all participate in policy development and governance from where you are in the United States of America? Our leaders, our politicians, our policymakers, are they listening to you, or are you reaching out to them?
Yeah, let me, this is sort of where I sort of swim in terms of, what I, like to do. I would say that there are two areas I would characterize it as. There are various non-government NGOs that currently exist, one of which is ORG. I'm not endorsing them in any way, but they do have various policy departments where Bahamians at home and abroad can join them and contribute to various initiatives, whether it be economic, social, political reform, and whatnot. So the beauty of this Zoom technology, we're able to work together with nonprofit organizations in the home and at home in the Bahamas and contribute to various policy development. I would also say that, and this is something I'm going to put on myself, is we should look about standardizing the diaspora. Jamaica has done it. For example, Ambassador Jones, you might be familiar with that initiative.
Yes, I am.
Prime Minister Holness is very much, and his administration, and it might have preceded him, I'm not sure, but they do have in place a diaspora organization. There was even talk about having members of the diaspora vote in Jamaican elections. I'm not sure whether I agree or not. I agree with having individuals who are not in a constituency vote in a constituency. Maybe they could have representation in the Senate. But the point is standardizing the diaspora, not just in the Western world. And then, my research is really the Caribbean and Sub-Saharan Africa. Do we have Bahamians? I believe there's a Bahamian doing some work in the crypto space in Kenya, various other places in Sub-Saharan Africa. So I want us to make sure that we don't focus the diaspora only on these Western countries, Europe, United States, Canada, but we probably have Bahamians doing good work in other parts of the world as well. And I think standardizing it at the governmental level would definitely help in bringing together those resources to the development of the country.
But to what extent should you be making your presence felt in terms of policy development generally in the country in various ways?
Well, again, it is a tricky question from a democratic position, right? Because you're not living in some place and you're making policy.
Yeah, no, but you're Bahamian. Certainly you can present your various views to those to the authorities, eh?
Yeah, and as I think we've been saying all program, as Bahamians, we have to be aggressive. We have to reach out to members of parliament. I was consulted in some limited respect in terms of figuring out how the Bahamas could have a diaspora presence, for example. And of course, the Jamaican example is instructive and we can look into that. But as I mentioned, there are a number of organizations, if you want to go that route, through the NGOs, but we could also write. I mean, you had a distinguished career through your various publications. One could write in those various media options or other competitors in the marketplace. we can call into shows, we can write, we can, as you know, Mrs. Bo has done. I've watched the program in Grand Bahama. I'm not sure how that's gone, but we can, of our own volition, go into the various schools. You know, Dr. Ferguson, I believe your name is. I don't know if you have continue to have a relationship with Doris Johnson and L.W. Young and those places where we mentor individuals. And if we can standardize it rather than just one off here and there, I think that would be much more impactful.
Yeah, can I just add, because I completely agree with everything Rashard has said. And surprise, surprise. And when it comes to standardization, I think that can help in two fronts. Well, first of all, let me say, I think the sort of obligation goes in both directions, and the benefit comes if we do it in both directions, where you have members of the diaspora actively reaching out and trying to find ways that they can help, but also having sort of the government of the Bahamas through its various arms reaching out as well to a coordinated diaspora community. And that, I think, can sort of drive focus in two different areas, right? So there's policy development and tapping into various experts that we have globally on various policies, depending on their expertise or their interest, but also mentorship, which is incredibly important. So when Rashard and I were in New York, we were members of the Bahamian American Association there. And part of what we were looking to do is develop a formal mentorship program so that persons in the tri-state area who have, are experienced in various professions can mentor younger Bahamians who are looking to get into those professions, or just generally wanting experience from others who are culturally similar to them.
Yeah.
There is, I think, no reason why we can't, also have some sort of formal mentorship pathway to connect Bahamians like ourselves who are all over the globe doing various things with Bahamians who are either in the Bahamas or just starting their journey outside of the Bahamas and looking for guidance.
Absolutely. So we want Bahamians to benefit from your exposure, Mr. Pilgrim, in the United States, right?
Absolutely, like no doubt. I mean, I think first of all, I second it. I know there's been a number of, I think, siloed attempts to try to at least coalesce around how many expats there are in the United States, making sure that we have a database of who's who and things like that. But I agree with Rashad. I think that there's an opportunity here to really like bubble up broader themes and really be a little bit more strategic and intentional about how we influence it. The one thing I'd like to add to this, though, is that the effectiveness of any type of policy development is going to be predicated on the government, whoever the current government is, their ability to be transparent about their agenda and the influence that others feel that they can make in terms of being able to make those types of contributions. So again, I'm not stating a state or claim of what that is. I think, depending on who you talk to, some people will say, well, where are my ideas going? I'm offering it up to the government. But I'd say this, as long as we continue to clarify the means of communication for all bodies, not just the diaspora, there are people at home that actually are struggling with this challenge as well, but making it very clear in ways that they can speak their voice, participate in an open and democratic process, and be able to influence the agenda for progress, I think is definitely a prerequisite that I don't want us to also miss out on.
Mrs. Pilgrim, we import a whole lot of things in the Bahamas. We are a residual kind of society. We import good habits and bad habits. We import inflation as well. And there's the rise in the cost of living, not only in the United States, but of course in our country as well, because as I said, we are a residual kind of society. And let me ask you, and ask you all, is the Bahamas, from your perspectives, headed in the right direction? We begin with Mrs. Pilgrim.
That's a loaded question. I think we are. I think, just evidenced by our panel and what they are doing and trying to do with the Bahamas in conjunction. I think we are for the most part. There are always areas where you can improve. Mm-hmm. That's sort of just how it is. but I think we're moving in the right direction with our government policies so far. And yeah, it's sort of difficult for me to chime in on that because I don't have a business perspective like how most of the panel does. So from a business perspective, I love that Tashay is, heading that cryptocurrency. And I like that in a business aspect, we are moving forward. I would like to see us move forward in a medical aspect too. I feel like that's a part, diversifying that industry and that part of things. I'd like to see that grow a little more in terms of research, as well as in terms of care. But yeah, I think we are headed in the right direction.
Dr. Ferguson, we are spending as a country hundreds of millions of dollars in the United States in medicine and medical services. I'm told that most of the insurance money is spent in the United States of America. As a physician, chime in on that, and how can we improve the quality of health in our country and retain some of the earnings in the Bahamas?
Very good question. I think this is, a complex question in the sense that it's somewhat loaded. I think in terms of the quality of healthcare in our country, we have to look at it into two spheres. You have, the public system, which is PHA, and you have the private system, which is Doctors Community Hospital, in addition to, not Doctors Community Hospital, Doctors Hospital, my apologies, in addition to other private clinics and entities. I think, the perception from most Bahamians is that Doctors Hospital offers and provides maybe US-based level care. I know that Doctors Hospital is the only hospital in the Caribbean that's JCI accredited, which is Joint Commissions, which is basically an accreditation board that looks at a number of different parameters to ensure that your hospital quality of care is up to standard, and they are accredited. So from that perspective, I think a lot of people feel confident in going along that route. But from the PHA aspect, there are a number of changes that need to happen, at Princess Margaret Hospital with respect to funding. I think funding is one of the major issues that we have in terms of dedicating more of our national budget towards healthcare, because our population is growing. Tourism is our number one industry, and the hotels and the condominiums that we're offering are growing. If you look at Freeport with the Rand Memorial Hospital, they need a lot of advancements as well. And they just signed the deal for Grand Lucaya. So they're going to have an influx of tourists coming as well. So the Rand needs to have some type of revamping. The only way that happens is if you invest some more finances into our public system so that we can provide adequate care. I think with the investment of the finances, we will be able to retain some of our nurses, because a lot of nurses take their American exams called the NCLEX, and they travel to America for better standard of living in addition to a better pay. And so for some people, you can't necessarily blame them. People may say they're not patriotic, but you can't necessarily blame them if they want to seek out a better standard of living and a better pay, for their skills. So I think with more investment from our national budget, we'll be able to pay the nurses. We'll be able to improve in terms of the bed availability, in terms of the facilities at the Princess Margaret Hospital, at the Rand Memorial Hospital, so that we can provide better care. From a surgical perspective, I know that there are a lot of times where you have a patient that's in the hospital for 2 or 3 weeks just because they're waiting for one procedure. So if you were to be more efficient with having the supplies needed to perform the procedure, you can have that patient out in 2 to 3 days, 4 or 5 days maximum. And then that opens up a bed for other patients to come in that have more critical illnesses. So it's a matter of investing into it, and it's a matter of investing into the system, and it's a matter of being a bit more efficient. Also, looking at the aspect of retaining talent. I know that earlier in the panel, I was listening to everyone talk and I wasn't able to chime in, but retaining talent is something important as well. When I come to the United States, my number one goal was to get my training and return home. But as I stay here longer and longer and longer, I'm starting to think about whether that's the best option for myself, for my family, et cetera, et cetera. But I do want to still return home in a capacity, whether it be full-time or part-time, similar to, giving back. We just, when Mr. Cooper just spoke about a few minutes ago, and probably work at PMH to give back, because my services would definitely be needed in a capacity where, whether it's part-time or full-time, I haven't decided that as yet. But these things need to be done to encourage people to come home, because they feel, when you train here and you're used to a standard of care here, you're going to think that, okay, I can live in this standard, as opposed to coming back to a lower standard where things are a bit more hectic. But if the government invests in terms of finances from the budget, improve the facilities and make the hospital more or less a bit more efficient, I think more physicians would want to come back home and want to raise the level of care that is there by bringing the specialist training that they would have had.
What do you think about a national health system, Dr. Ferguson?
I think that it's a great initiative, and I think that it's definitely a start. I think that it won't be able to. I don't think that it would be able to necessarily facilitate all of the health issues that we have, but I think it's a good start for primary care, in particular for non-communicable diseases, hypertension, diabetes, things of that nature that kind of start off in the early parts that make people a bit more sicker when they're later on, down in their ages. So I think it's a good start so that our primary healthcare system and our population in general could be a bit more healthier. However, I feel that ultimately, it may not be all encompassing for everything that our health system needs to deal with on a daily basis. But I think it's good.
Okay, given the amount of research that you're doing, Mrs. Pilgrim, you might want to chime in on that particular point.
I think a national healthcare system is a really good idea if it's structured and implemented properly. I think one of the mainstays of such a program is preventative care. If you can prevent people from entering the medical system in terms of their health, you've already won. And so investing in that, I think would be a really great idea in that area of national insurance would be a really great idea. I love the concept of a national insurance and yeah, especially we have an aging population, a large aging population. A lot of our parents and grandparents, they get very old and they're still healthy and active and vibrant, and being able to have a healthcare system, a national healthcare system that assists them, especially when they reach a certain age and cannot qualify for health insurance, right? I think that's just an excellent way to take care of our community.
When I accepted the offer to be ambassador to the United States of America, one of the things I said is that I'm going to the United States of America in search of these talented Bahamians so that they are able to express themselves and to inspire young Bahamians who are living in the Bahamas and who are perhaps watching and listening to you now. You have your aspirations for your country, the Bahamas. But in the closing minutes of this program, I'm going to ask you from the left of my screen here to inspire as best you can the young Bahamians who are listening and watching you right now. Mr. Pilgrim?
Sure. And again, Ambassador Jones, I appreciate the time spent on this program. It's been amazing with my fellow panelists. I would say in terms of inspiration, I started my journey without knowing exactly where I was going to go. I started out without any means to be able to get off, but all I had was a big vision of what I wanted to become. And I think it starts there, right? Holding yourself accountable, but you have to start with a dream. And I think just following through, executing, not knowing exactly where it's going to turn out. I think there's merit in hard work and being able to just start. Once you start, you never know where you're going to finish. I think having seeing us here is, you know, many of us here are examples of that journey. And I would encourage anyone to not be fearful or you know, or without faith in terms of where you're going to end up. Just start, and it will be fine.
Bo?
You know, I echo the sentiments of Mr. Pilgrim. I had no idea that I would do half of the things that it is that I've done. And early on, there were things that I thought that were disadvantages that actually proved out to be advantages. The work ethic, not necessarily having all the tools or all the things you need at your disposal. I did more with less because I had to. And as a result, I was able to go further and to work harder. So, you know, be encouraged. And more importantly, we are a resource. We're real people. We're happy to tell you our stories. We're happy to make introductions. We're happy to facilitate your development in any way that we can. So please do not hesitate to reach out to me or anybody that you see in the Bahamas or in the diaspora that you believe can help you.
Dr. Ferguson.
I would essentially say, you know, it's not about essentially where you start, but it's about how you finished. I would tell them that, you know, it's about having discipline, having a goal and staying focused towards that goal. Similar to what Ms. Bo said, you know, I've kind of, since I've marched over to this side, I've actually reached back and helped a few other people get positions in the United States of America. Since I've been here. So, you know, we're always willing, you know, wanting to assist our fellow countrymen and women to also excel and, you know, push themselves further. But I would just essentially say, just remember to stay disciplined, stay focused, have a goal and work towards it. And anything that you put your mind to, you definitely can achieve, whether it be, you know, in the medical field, in the law field, whether it be in a technical field. You can be the best marine engineer that, you know, that ever walked the planet. You can be the best masonry person that ever walked the planet. But whatever it is, stick to it, be good at it. Because once you're good at it, especially in services, and you have, you know, good technical abilities, someone will pay you to do the work.
Is Robert Pilgrim?
I guess I'll buck the system a little bit. My advice would not be to the young people coming up. I feel like they're full of inspiration and promise. My advice would be to the generation right above them to take to heart that it takes a village. It takes a village to raise younger people that need guidance, that need help, advice, and it starts at home first, and it starts with the community that they are in. And I would encourage our middle-aged and older Bahamians to reach out to younger people who are open and looking for help with just some decisions that they need to make, ways, you know, choices that they can make in terms of jobs and education, and just be a part of their village and show up. So, and I want to echo Ms. Bo that I think all of us here on the panel are open and willing to talk to any Bahamians that have questions. You know, I think we all feel that we have something that we can share with them that might just help their journey to be a little easier, or them to see a different aspect of things. And so I think we would all welcome that.
Let's move over to the Coopers. To Shay.
Sure. Well, thank you again for having us. This has been fantastic, and I've learned a lot from my fellow panelists. You know, as I said at the beginning, you know, where I started, you know, growing up in Bimini, running around, you know, barefoot, as they say, barefoot Bimini gal, you know, I would have never thought that, you know, my journey was possible and certainly not probable. And I actually couldn't have scripted this for myself. And I think that prospect of something you can't even imagine is possible for anyone in the Bahamas, right? So, you know, be bold in your aspirations, be bold in your vision for yourself, and always keep in mind that like everything you do becomes part of your personal brand, and everything that you practice becomes your habits, and your habits become who you are. So take pride in every step, whether it's like just how you complete your homework or like how you handle your first job. My first job out of high school got me my law firm job later down the line, just because of the reputation I've built. Everything that you do becomes part of your brand and part of sort of your track record. So take pride at every step, and then be courageous and be curious. So always be, you know, thinking about, you know, how this works, how that works, learning about the intricacies of various things. There's Google that's accessible to all of us. You know, be a lifelong student. And always be curious, and that'll take you far. And when I say be courageous, sometimes it takes courage to reach out to someone you don't know, to reach out to like an Aisha Bo or like anyone else on this panel who won't know you from Adam, but just, you know, to reach out and to say, hey, can I pick your brain on something? Can I understand what your experience was like? You never know what door that can open for you, right? So take pride in what you do, be curious and be courageous.
Mr. Cooper.
Well, my heart is full attending this hour and a half presentation and interview. It's really a testament to the achievements of the Bahamian people. I would say to the young people of the Bahamas that the accomplishments, the blood, the sweat, the tears of our ancestors runs through your veins. You can achieve anything you put your mind to with hard work, with dedication and focus. No need to repeat the excellent advice that was given by my colleagues on the panel today, but we are indeed a chosen people, a people set apart. So I would just like to encourage them that you are enough. You know, we have a situation in the Bahamas, you know, your father may not be around, you may not be able to afford this, you may not be able to afford that, but wherever you are, whatever you have enough. And you are able to improve your lot, your situation in life based on the great advice today. So I just want to encourage you to keep going, to keep pushing on. You will have setbacks along the way. All of us can, you know, spend an hours speaking about it, but we are all here to help out. And I'm sure our information will be provided at some point. So again, thank you for the opportunity, and, you know, God bless the Bahamas. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cooper, you paraphrased or said something that your grandfather said in the first independence sermon, that we are a chosen generation, a peculiar people. And I'd like to thank you all for participating in this conversation today, and congratulations to you all for what you what you are doing. And we are going to continue these conversations with the assistance of the consulate offices throughout the United States of America. And I hope that other people in the various professions would be able to join us and inspire people back in the Bahamas. So thank you all so very much for your participation today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'd like to say a special thank you to the hardworking staff here in the Embassy of the Bahamas in Washington, D.C., Jade Williams, Third Secretary, Cameron Ferguson, the Facilities Manager, Jasmine Lightman, who is my Executive Assistant, and Sonia Rose, Minister Counselor, as well as the producer of this particular conversation. She did a fantastic job in getting you all here today. So thank you so very much. And thank you all for listening and watching wherever you are in the Bahamas and around the world. Thank you.